Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the KTBS podcast production, The App. It's a political podcast. The App has nothing to do with computers. The App stands for ArkLaTex People and Politics. We like to visit with anybody along the political spectrum that we can. And today, our special guest, State Senator Adam Bass from the Shreveport-Bossier area. And thanks for being with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
We do appreciate it. And we're just a few days removed now from an election that didn't quite go the way the governor or the legislature wanted it, I believe. 4 constitutional amendments kind of went down in flames, really. Got defeated by a large margin. And just to get things rolling here, I wanted to get your thoughts on that, your opinions on why you believe that occurred.
Well, I think it comes down to communication. I think there was a lot of misinformation that was given. There was a lot of people that were concerned as to whether it was good for them or not. I took a lot of phone calls from teachers wondering if it was going to affect their retirement. I took some phone calls from churches wondering about their tax status and worried that, it may remove some protections from them. We went down, we got a chance to work on our tax structure, and we had quite a few things that were successful during that special session that the governor called. One of the most disappointing things for our area that got defeated in the amendment number 2 was severance tax. I represent Bossier Parish and Webster Parish. And just in Bossier Parish, you had over $57 million from the Haynesville Shale that was collected. That splits 80% goes to the state and 20% goes to the locals. But the locals' 20% is actually capped. So they're capped at $1.2 million. So think about that.
Yeah.
That's about a $12 million difference that could have gone to local roads and bridges that was generated in Bossier Parish that instead is going down to Baton Rouge. And now we're going to go have a discussion as to whether that money should come back and be invested in our area. So I grew up playing sports.
Yeah.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. The people said no, so we need to go back and come up with what the people do want and send it back to them to vote. And hopefully we get through that and make our environment more friendly for people to move into the state.
Do you think it just came down to communication, though? The message not getting across properly? In other words, when you mentioned the teachers, the way I understand it was you were going to take this money from an educational fund, pay down the retirement, the unaccrued liabilities. That would save, $300 million a year or something like that in interest payments, which would then be utilized to create raises for the teachers. And they voted no.
Well, the easiest way to explain it and trying to make it simple is a lot of people have a mortgage, right?
Right.
Well, their retirement has a mortgage on it. And so the idea is that money that's going to pay that mortgage each month, we were going to pay off the mortgage on their retirement debt, which would free up that monthly mortgage payment and allow that, as I actually mandate that, to go to the teachers in the form of a raise. But I took several calls. They were worried that it was going to affect their retirement and some other things. But at the end of the day, the voters, regardless of whether it was communication or something else, the voters said no at an overwhelming, clip. So we're going to go back to the drawing board and still try to affect some change on our tax policy and try and change some things that make it better for the people.
Will you be able to? Is it even going to be a priority this coming session, which starts in a couple of weeks? Is it going to be a priority to find a way to give these teachers these stipends they've been receiving?
Well, I think taxes are always a priority, right? You always want to get that right. That's the people's money that you're dealing with. My wife is a teacher. I can tell you, I see the hours that she puts in. It's cliche, but one of my favorite sayings is, if you can read this, you can thank a teacher, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so the amount of work that they're putting in and the amount of gains that you've seen a gain in literacy for fourth graders.
Yeah.
You're starting to see a lot of that. And that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Those teachers are the ones doing that. So as far as the will of the legislature, there's 144 between the House and Senate. So that's getting the majority of those people to agree on what goes on. So I guess we'll see when we get down in a few weeks as to what the will of the legislature is and go from there.
Yeah, I'm also married to a teacher, so I get it. I know
Absolutely.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Does yours have that teacher's voice where when they use it, you're in trouble?
Oh, yeah, that's pretty much all I hear. Yeah, I'm so used to that now, I don't know the difference anymore.
I think they all have that. I think that's part of the training.
All right, so those constitutional amendments went down in flames, and now it's like you said, back to the drawing board. The session coming up. So what's the priority now moving forward?
Well, I think overwhelmingly, from what I'm hearing from both my constituents and from a state perspective, is insurance. I think
right.
you have so many people that are struggling to pay their insurance. You have companies, trucking companies and others that are leaving the state because the insurance is either so high or they don't have access to it. And, if you hear Commissioner Temple speak, which he was in town in Shreveport yesterday,
right,
and we got a chance to hear him last week speak to us, you kind of look for what is the outlier. Why do you think those are high?
mm-hmm.
And, when you're filing 3 times as many bodily injury claims as the national average, and you're paying out 200% of what the national average is in both verdicts and settlements, insurance at the end of the day is a cost plus product. Whatever it costs to pay out claims plus whatever that is ends up being premium. So when you see a verdict come out of East Baton Rouge Parish on the 28th of February for $411 million.
I saw that. That's crazy.
I mean, to me, that is part of the problem and one of the overwhelming reasons that we have the rates that we have. You see some of the reforms that were done last year in the regular session on property. Commissioner Temple told us that you have 8 companies that have taken rate decreases since those reforms have been made, and you have another 10 companies that have applied to actually come and write homeowners business in the state of Louisiana. That's trending and moving in the right direction according to him. But as far as auto insurance goes, which I think a lot lot of people
that's the one
really,
that's really,
they really want to talk about. I just don't think you're going to be able to address that without legal reform.
So what form does the legal reform need to take? Is it that bodily injury stuff, the courts?
Well, I think transparency. So I'll give you an example.
You're talking about medical billing now.
I'm talking about medical billing.
Yeah.
So in our state, if you get an EOB, right, you go to the doctor and let's just use simple math. There's $100 that was paid.
Yeah.
Then you get your evidence of benefits that comes in, and you look at that $100 that was billed, and there was $10 that was actually paid out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
by the insurance company.
Only the $10 isn't admissible. All that's admissible in court is what was billed. So that's $100 that is all that jury is going to see. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying whether we should pay one or the other, but I think you should at least be able to have the jury see that and hear that and understand that. At the end of the day, an insurance policy is an indemnity policy, which means you're brought back to where you were before the accident, right? No better, no worse. And I don't know the particulars of the $411 million settlement, but it would be difficult for me to understand how that's not making you better than you were before, and it's a windfall.
Well, and you work in the insurance industry.
Yes, so I'm an insurance agent, right? I don't own insurance companies. I represent my clients. I work for a captive insurer, so I represent one company. But, Commissioner Temple came from the industry. Mm-hmm. So I think you want somebody that kind of has lived in that world to understand kind of the steps that need to be taken in order to help people. And I think you see that starting to take effect for the people from property insurance. And I think that we've got some work to do as far as auto insurance.
A few years ago, I'm going to say 4 now, I'm trying to remember when it was, when tort reform, we heard tort reform. And at the time, I believe Stephen Wagaspak was running lobby. They were really pushing that. It got passed. I remember him kind of coming out after the session was over and kind of dancing down the steps at the Capitol. He was so happy. But it's been several years now, and it hasn't helped, has it?
Well, you go back and look at those, and I wasn't in the legislature, but what's been communicated to me is, yes, there were some things that were passed, but they were amended to the point where they weren't effective.
Okay.
And so you see, let's not recreate the wheel. You see Florida, you see Georgia that have passed some of the things that we want to pass, and they're having the effect that Florida and Georgia wanted them to have. To me, if something's working, then let's go take that's actually we can see is working, and let's adopt that for our people and make it where they can afford to pay for their insurance and do what they need to do.
Can you give me a little example of something that, let's say in Georgia, I'm from Georgia, so what?
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, from an SEC area, that's tough to hear that you're from Georgia.
Go dog.
Well, one of the things that they passed was, like we're talking about, medical transparency. They're paying what's billed.
Yeah.
I mean, they're paying what's actually paid out and not what was billed.
Yeah.
So, I think that's something that very well could be very effective, because if you got a $100 bill and $10 is all that's being paid out, right?
Yeah.
Then to make you whole, to make you back to where you were before the accident, you should pay the $10. And I think that's important. You've got something called Housley, which is a presumption, which basically says anything that happens after the accident, it was presumed to have occurred because of the accident. Mm-hmm. So I'm not an attorney, but here's how it was best described to me.
Okay.
You have diabetes after the accident. Well, you got in an accident and you were hurt, right?
Yeah,
which
right.
caused you to be less mobile than you were, which caused you to gain weight, which
Yeah.
caused you to have diabetes. And
Okay.
so everything from the diabetes is presumed to be from the accident.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so, you've got that. You've got no pay, no play.
What does that mean exactly?
So if you're driving around without insurance coverage, you're breaking the law, right?
Yeah, sure.
If
Yeah.
you're driving around, you
Right.
have to have insurance.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't go out and purchase insurance and you're driving around uninsured, we don't want you to be able to collect, and be injured because you shouldn't have been on the road in the first place.
Right.
You were breaking the law. So if you don't have insurance coverage, then no pay. You
Yeah.
didn't pay for insurance, then
Gotcha.
you're not going to get a chance to play in the court system.
I mean, that makes perfect sense to me.
Right.
Right.
It gets very complicated and
Yeah.
in the weeds because insurance is just boring by nature.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, nobody really understands it. I mean, you do. I don't. I
Well,
mean,
but at the end of the day, a lot of it, when you're able to kind of break it down, it seems like common sense.
okay. So the bill you were talking about, the medical billing you were talking, I think Rep. Mellering carried that bill last year, right?
Well, he carried a version of the technical term for it is collateral source.
That's it. Yeah, I couldn't think of it, but
did.
And we had Commissioner Temple in here about a week ago, and he said he was all for that. The governor decided to veto that. I guess he put out a message of why he decided to veto that, but and he wouldn't comment on that other than to say he disagreed with it. He thought that bill was a good bill and should have passed. What do you think?
I think you should pay what was actually paid out. I mean,
Okay.
my example, $100,
Yeah.
right? You pay out 10, the $90 takes you back better than you were, and it's a windfall that everybody else is paying for,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everybody else,
Right.
that $411 million verdict is a huge number, but at the end of the day, that's getting passed on to every consumer in the form of rates, and when you see those over and over and over again, you get to a point where you see what we're dealing with. I went to an event actually today that was put on. They called it the tort tax. Now, I don't like tort because that's a breakfast food, right?
Yeah.
But it's a lawsuit tax.
Yeah.
And so our people in our state pay a higher percentage of their overall income per year on insurance than any other state in the union. We got to fix that.
Yeah.
We've got an out migration. More people are moving out than are moving in. And if we don't fix this, we're going to continue to have those people move away from us.
So everybody wants to know. They just want how low can you get this? How fast can it happen? It's not a fast thing, is it?
Well, look, we didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times you've got cases that take years to get to court. But I do think with what you've seen with property, what we're trying to do is attract more carriers because, like I said, we have an affordability and an availability problem. And so what we want to do is create a healthy insurance market where you create competition,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And it takes a while for those companies to come in and start writing business and start doing that. And what we want to do is create enough competition where you start to see that competitive free market start to take effect and help people with that availability and that affordability problem.
Well, when these companies that maybe you're trying to recruit to come into Louisiana see, I don't mean you specifically, but they see these $400 million verdicts, I mean, how anxious are they going to be to come to Louisiana and write auto insurance?
Well,
Sorry, I couldn't get the word out.
Well, that's okay. The ones I feel the worst for are those that are driving commercial vehicles.
Right.
And so when you hear commercial vehicles, right?
Trucking company.
Well, you think about 18-wheelers.
Yeah.
But also think about your electricians, your
True.
plumbers,
Sure.
your HVAC people. I mean, those people that you absolutely need that are some of the backbone of what needs to go on in our area, that's being passed along to them too. And so they're passing it along to their customers because they've, of course, got to make a profit. Now, personal lines auto, I mean, you have the same thing. We have a large amount of people that are driving around that are underinsured as far as the liability limits. But so many of those, they're making a choice. I have to have the car to get to work.
Right.
I have to have the gas to get to work. The insurance sometimes, right, is what gives, and that is just perpetuating this cycle of where you're continuing to have these claims that are paid out at such alarming rates, like $411 million.
That's crazy to me. I just don't see how that can be done. Is that just juries, like, let's stick it to the insurance companies? Is that the mindset?
I don't know the particulars of that case.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of what went on, and I'm sure they're very, serious injuries that happened.
Sure.
But I just like to compare us. I get so frustrated when we're one of one, right? Louisiana is doing it differently than every other state, or we're one of two or one of three. I just want to get us in line with those states that are doing it and are paying less in premium than we are. I mean, that's where we want to go, right? I'm so tired of being last in everything, and especially in this metric.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to switch gears just for a second.
Okay.
I want to talk to you about your daughter for a couple of minutes.
Sounds good.
I had the pleasure of meeting her and doing the story with her. Explain what I'm talking about.
Hopefully I get a chance to brag on her.
Go right ahead.
I'm going to brag on her.
Absolutely.
So my daughter is very involved in beauty pageants. And so we had the opportunity to compete in the Miss America pageant for high school.
Yeah.
And so she won the high school Miss America pageant, and she's going to get a chance to go and compete in the national pageant in July in Arkansas and Little Rock. And so hopefully, hopefully we get to bring home the crown. And it's bittersweet. She's 17. She's going into her senior year. So we're going over things like ring ding and college applications and those kind of things. And her being, daddy's girl, that's going to probably make me cry. And
Come on now.
I haven't experienced that yet. So, but yes, I'm very proud of Baylor, and I'm proud of both of my boys, Bear and Beckett. And,
sure.
That's the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because selfishly, I would love to see them have their jobs, their employment, and my grandkids right here in our area.
You're right, of course. Well, we did that story with Baylor about a year ago.
Yeah,
I guess.
We did that story with her about a year ago, and she competed in another pageant, and she had success in that one. And this is just a continuation of that.
Well, she's a beautiful girl, and she's incredibly intelligent.
Thank you.
So
she gets that part from her mom.
I was going to say that, but she was and very glib, very well spoken, right, for a 17-year-old. Like, she might have even been 16 at the time we did that story. But she's an impressive young lady, my friend.
Well, thank you very much. I can't say thank you enough. I'm so proud of her, and again, proud of her and all my kids.
Of course. All right, so let's. We've established that insurance is going to be kind of a focal point, right, of this upcoming session. And it's a fiscal session, so you're limited in the number of bills that you can bring outside the fiscal realm. What kind of bills might you be carrying?
Well, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much. We haven't met that deadline yet, but I've already filed some bills. I've got a bill on drones.
Okay.
I have drafted it specifically to protect military bases and installations. Right?
Right, sure.
When you go and you look at the risk and what has happened at other bases, and how those drones can be used, I want to make sure that we have a chance to really protect our military base here, which is Barksdale Air Force Base, right? And also filing some bills for Louisiana economic development and some things that they're doing. One of the things we did in the tax session is we're completely reworking those incentives to try and attract those businesses to our area and retain them. I'm also get a chance to carry a bill on some power generation and some other things that we're going through there. So those are the ones that are filed right now.
Okay.
We're still working through the final language of those other two, but that deadline's fast approaching, as so is session, but those are some of the things that we're working on right now.
Intriguing. I'm very interested in the drone thing. Obviously, there was a big problem a few months ago. Was it Pennsylvania or Ohio? I can't remember where it was.
You pick a state. I mean, you've had them in Virginia, you've had them in Ohio, you've had them, even when the terrorist attack happened in New Orleans, you heard the governor talk quite a bit about drones being around certain critical infrastructure. But my main thing is we have the bombers there on airline.
Right.
At Barksdale, and the nuclear weapons that are there, which is part of our response, which is peace through strength. So we want to make sure that we can protect those assets and those airmen there on base.
Since you mentioned that, let me ask you this question. There's been some of your other colleagues. We've done several since the election last week. One of their thoughts, a couple of their thoughts were that there's just a general mistrust right now between their constituents, the voters, and all politicians. So if you guys are recommending 4 constitutional amendments, they're going to vote against it. Do you feel that there's that general mistrust?
I think you're starting to hopefully see a turn in that.
Okay.
I think a lot of that is national. I think some of that is on the state level too. But you saw what I'm going to call a directive for the first time. You have all Republican elected state official. You got a supermajority in the House, a Republican supermajority in the Senate. Mm-hmm. I think some of the things that are going on with the government efficiency, right, where we're trying to find government waste both on a national level and on a state level. Mm-hmm. I think politicians are aware of that, and they're trying to address that by helping identify that wasteful spending. Because at the end of the day, that's not our money. That's the people's money.
That's true.
And that's what we need to be good stewards of. As far as in the past, I've been on the job now for about 14 months. Mm-hmm. I'm brand new to the legislature, so I'm trying to evaluate, how being that politician that's in the state legislature, how I'm being evaluated. But I don't think it's unfair to say there has been a distrust in the past.
Okay, but you feel like it's turning a little bit.
I hope so.
You hope so.
You see constitutional amendments get beaten the way they are. Yeah. I think it's a lot of miscommunication, but I think there's a trust issue there too. Again, the people said no. That's who we work for. Yeah. So we're going to go back to the drawing board and try and bring something back that works for them and is what's best for them. So that's what we're going to do.
You got to simplify. I think you got to simplify. That's me being silly. I don't know what I'm talking about, I guess. But it feels like that Amendment 2, which was the important one, had so much stuff in it, and people were just wary of it. There were too many parts. You got to break it up into like one amendment, one idea.
Well, and you got so many people that just default to no on amendments. Right. And I think that's one of the things that you've seen is the call for a constitutional convention, because our Constitution is just, it's huge. Yeah. It's so thick. Yeah. And so when you do a complete rewrite, which is what Constitutional Amendment 2 was, it was a complete rewrite of Article 7.
Correct. Yep.
Right? You got 115 pages. Mm-hmm.
And nobody's going to go read that.
Well, we did.
You did.
I did.
But the general, I would say the general public.
But it's difficult when you're going to amend something that's that size. It's difficult to make it simplified where you can put it in ballot language, where you can't put 115 pages on a ballot and expect somebody to go read that in the voting booth.
Yeah, I think on the ballot there was 90 words or 91 words that said what that amendment was about.
You have very specific number of words that you can use that actually will fit on there. Yeah. And so I just think there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of miscommunication. But we're not going to dwell on that. We're going to have to move our state forward, and what we're trying to do is attract people to move here instead of have people move out of the state. And so we're going to go back to the drawing board and try and find out what went wrong or what we need to change, and we're going to address it and try and affect change and bring it back to the voters.
What did you think about, what are your thoughts on Amendment 3? Again, one of your colleagues, a couple of them, thought that that was dealing with the minors and I guess expanding the crimes that they could be charged as adults. Mm-hmm. They thought that a lot of people didn't like that one at all. So they voted no on that and then voted no on everything else along the way.
Well, so I'm a big supporter of law enforcement. I believe that we should back the blue. And when you go and talk to our law enforcement about what they've been experiencing and the age at which they're starting to see some of these serious crimes. Yeah. When we went into the crime special session, we had 3 of the top 10 murder capitals in the whole United States that were here in Louisiana. Yeah. One of them was in Shreveport. And when you go and talk to law enforcement and see and ask them what's going on, at what age they're going to commit these, and they tell you that's going on, you try to address it. But again, that's not something that the people wanted, and that's not something that passed. So we're going to continue to try and see what we can do to affect change and make our state safe and our area safe.
Overall, you did have that special session on crime. Overall, do you feel like that had an effect and crime is kind of on the downward side?
Look, I went to a sheriff's breakfast that Sheriff Whittington put on yesterday, and I got a chance to see what Bossier's crime statistics were. And year over year, they've improved. And I got to believe that hopefully we gave them the tools in that session to be able to go out and enforce the law. And I don't want to say by any means that we're out there putting our lives on the line like they are, but we have to give them the laws and the tools to where they can go out and keep us safe. And I'm hopeful, and I do believe that we help do that.
I think it was just yesterday, Governor Landry put out, I'm all over the place here on questioning, sorry.
That's good.
But he put out a directive, I guess, like an executive order, if you want to call it that, trying to, no more hiring, a hiring freeze, no more, he's trying to save $20 million a year, I guess, because of the climate, kind of like Doge, as you mentioned. Good idea, bad idea? How do you think that's going to be received?
Well, that just came out yesterday.
Yeah.
The constitutional amendments went down on Saturday. So you have revenue estimating, which comes out and says, here's how much money the state has for budgeting purposes. And so I don't know, good idea or bad idea. I know that it's a cautious move to try and make sure that we have what we need in order to do that and make sure that we're effectively doing it. I don't think anybody's going to argue with you that we have too many employees in certain departments in the state, and I think that's part of what's being evaluated is the efficiency. And so putting a hiring freeze on while we're going into a fiscal session to make sure that we know what we're dealing with and how we need to address it, I think it's very cautious, but I think it's also prudent for us to be able to make sure that we have what we need to give the people the services that they need.
Prudent's a good word. I think that's a nice way to approach government, right? Being prudent.
Well, I think that's how you would approach your own checkbook, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully you're not going out and spending a bunch of money that you don't have or going out and really blowing through your budget. So I approach things like that the way I would want to approach them in my own business and my own household. So I think that's prudent.
When you have town halls and you're out there visiting people, going to luncheons or breakfast with the sheriff, you get to meet people one-on-one, you talk to them. What's uppermost on their mind?
Well, I think we've already addressed that. I think the number one issue, as we said before, was insurance and legal reform. And I think people are very passionate about that, as they should be. Like I said, you've got, we're paying more of a higher percentage of our income than any other state, and I think that gets people's attention, and it's definitely got my attention, and hopefully we're able to go into session and address that. Some of the other things that are being discussed, DOTD, as far as our infrastructure, our roads, the condition they're in, what we've seen in the past, how they've addressed it. So I think you'll see quite a bit of interest in how we go about possibly reorganizing that to have a better outcome for our roads and bridges. I think that's going to be a hot topic of discussion. So
it should be. I mean, you can't even drive around the Shreveport-Bossier area right now, right?
My unofficial, unscientific polling numbers say that very few people are happy with the way that DOTD has functioned in the past. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to go address that and make sure that it's something that we can start to change that.
Okay, we're down to like our final minute or so. Just looking forward to the special session. What's the kind of the last word you'd like to leave with folks watching this podcast or listening to it about the upcoming session?
Well, you have a fiscal session, so we're going to go down, we're going to look at our budget, we're going to look what we have, we're going to stay within our means, we're not going to spend more than we have. So the last thing I would leave them with is that you're being listened to, that for me you're being heard, and that I understand, I believe what my constituents are telling me and what they want to see done. And those are the things that we're going to go down and address, and we've talked about them here today and what we're going to go down and try and attack.
It's all every session it's always the battle. Well, it wasn't the last session so much, but getting that budget passed almost always seems to come down to the final few minutes. With the defeat of the amendments, is that going to affect the passing of this upcoming budget?
I think you got to evaluate it, because you had to look at it two ways, right? If the amendment passed and if the amendment didn't pass. So I think you kind of have to see and evaluate, what was going to happen if the amendments passed. Now what's going to happen that they haven't, and I think you're still, that just happened Saturday. So I think we're still in that evaluation, trying to figure out what's going to happen and what that leaves our state budget in as far as condition.
All right, well, you guys got a lot of things to consider in this upcoming session, huh?
Absolutely, and we're going to go down and we're going to do the work.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely, I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. State Senator Adam Bass, representing District 36, and a proud dad.
Absolutely.
A proud dad with a beauty queen for a daughter. And tell her I said hi.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much.
All right, Senator Adam Bass here on the app, the ArkLaTex People and Politics. We appreciate him being here. Appreciate you watching or listening wherever you get your podcast. and on all KTBS digital channels as well. Have a good one, everybody.